Is ChatGPT's recent code red actually a strategic pivot, or is it a quiet death rattle that nobody wants to admit? That is the question keeping Silicon Valley up at night, and the answer isn't nearly as simple as the headlines suggest. Welcome to the Emma Quinn Show. I'm your host, and today I want to strip away the marketing hype and the feature announcements to look at the actual war being fought right now between OpenAI, Google, and Apple. Let's start with the elephant in the room, OpenAI declaring a code red. Now, usually when a massive tech company declares a code red, it's because something catastrophic happened to the technology. Servers are down or there's a massive security breach. But in this case, the technology is fine. The crisis is purely competitive. The reality is that Google's Gemini is rapidly eroding OpenAI's first mover advantage. For a long time, ChatGPT was the only game in town, but that gap has closed. Sam Altman has reportedly ordered a massive strategy shift because of this, effectively telling his teams to sideline all those niche products and experimental features to focus 100% on improving the core ChatGPT experience. Why the sudden panic? It comes down to a metric that most tech enthusiasts completely misunderstand. We love arguing about benchmarks. Does this model score 2% higher on a coding test, or can it pass the bar exam? But here is the brutal truth. Industry benchmarks are irrelevant to mass adoption. The average person does not care about a trivia score. They care about user experience. Is it fun? Is it fast? Can it generate that funny image I want for my presentation instantly? That is where the real war is won. OpenAI knows that if they lose the fun factor, they lose the war, regardless of how smart the model is. This brings us to the terrifying power of the ecosystem, and this is where Google is absolutely crushing it. Google grew its AI user base to roughly 650 million monthly users almost effortlessly. They didn't have to launch a massive marketing campaign. They just integrated the tech into the tools you already use. OpenAI, on the other hand, has to fight and claw for every single user sign-up. This highlights what I call the utility trap. OpenAI realizes they cannot beat Google on utility because Google already owns your email, your documents, your calendar, your search history. OpenAI is just a chatbot in a browser tab. Google is the operating system of your life. So if you are Sam Altman and you realize you cannot win on utility, what do? You pivot to the only lane left open: companionship. OpenAI is effectively dusting off the Facebook playbook. Have you noticed they aren't aggressively pushing ads yet? That is intentional. They are prioritizing personalization and emotional attachment over revenue right now. They want you psychologically hooked, feeling like ChatGPT is your friend, your confidant, before they try to monetize you. It is a pivot from being a tool to being a companion. They need you to feel an emotional withdrawal if you stop using it, because that is the only moat they have left against Google's convenience. And frankly, they have to do this out of desperation. The financial reality here is starker than most people realize. OpenAI is not projected to be profitable until around 2030, and they're planning to burn nearly $1 trillion on infrastructure to get there. Think about those numbers. They simply cannot win a war of attrition against Google's cash reserves. Google is a profit machine that can afford to bleed money on AI for a decade without blinking. OpenAI does not have that luxury. They need a massive addicted user base, and they need it yesterday. Now, let's look at the third player in this drama, the one that everyone seems to think is losing the race: Apple. I hear this narrative all the time. Apple is behind. Siri is dumb. Why haven't they launched a chatbot? But I want you to look closer. Apple's silence is not incompetence. It's calculated. They aren't behind. They're actively opting out of the ship-broken software race to protect their brand reputation. You have to remember that Apple is a hardware company, not a software startup. If OpenAI ships that chatbot that hallucinates or says something offensive, they just patch it next week and apologize. If Apple ships a buggy AI that ruins your iPhone experience, that destroys hardware sales. The stakes are completely different. You cannot patch a reputation once people decide your $1,000 phone is dumb. A flawed launch for Apple is an existential threat in a way it isn't for a web-based platform. In fact, Apple is likely playing the role of Kingmaker here. They hold the ultimate distribution power, billions of pockets around the world. They're likely just waiting to see who wins this slugfest between Google and OpenAI, and then they will partner with the winner to instantly distribute the best tech to their users. By doing nothing, they force Google and OpenAI to burn their own cash competing for Apple's partnership. It's a brilliant leverage play. Apple is letting everyone else go broke developing the tech so they can swoop in and perfect the interface. So, what does this mean for you? How should you actually navigate this as a user or a business owner? First, you need to diversify your AI stack. I see too many people building their entire personal or business workflow solely around ChatGPT. That is risky. You need to begin testing Gemini, especially for tasks that require integration with live data or your Google Workspace. Don't be loyal to a brand, be loyal to the utility. Second, and this is for the entrepreneurs listening, adopt the Apple strategy. In your own business, do not rush to implement buggy AI tools just to be first or to look cutting edge. Waiting for a stable, polished tool often builds more long-term trust with your customers than being on the bleeding edge and delivering a broken experience. Let your competitors make the expensive mistakes. Finally, if you're a developer or you work in tech, monitor the ecosystem closely. Watch Apple's next move. The winner of this AI race likely won't be decided by who has the highest IQ score on a benchmark test. It will be decided by whoever Apple chooses to integrate into iOS. The moment that happens, the landscape shifts overnight. The core narrative you need to take away from this episode is this: OpenAI is pivoting to psychological addiction to survive Google's ecosystem dominance, while Apple deliberately waits on the sidelines to adopt the winner. It's a game of chess where one player is rushing, one is fortifying, and one is watching. As you go about your week and open up that chatbot, I want to leave you with one question to really sit with. If OpenAI succeeds in making their AI emotionally irresistible, will you still be using it as a tool to improve your work, or will the tool eventually be using you?